Let's take you live to Hillsborough in County Down. The President and Vice President of Sinn Fein, Lou McDonald, who's speaking now, alongside Michelle ONeill. They have just finished their meeting with Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
We have no clarity bar this absolute certainty, and that is that the time for the executive is now. The time to appoint a First and Deputy First Minister is now. To appoint a Speaker to the Assembly is now. People have had their election. It's been a long election campaign, goodness knows. And now is the time for people to get back to work. And here's the real kicker, right? There is an established mechanism through the Joint Committee to deal with those elements of the protocol that need to be smoothed out, finessed and altered. The Prime Minister is aware of that. The government in Dublin is aware of that, the European institutions are aware of that, and yet here we find ourselves in a situation where the British Prime Minister is quite willing to act in coordination with the DUP with very, very unacceptable obstructionist tactics. And what that says to the population, people who are struggling now to pay for their groceries and to keep the show on the road in their own homes and their own families, is just astounding. It's not acceptable in the north of Ireland, and I dare say it would not be acceptable anywhere else. In England, in Boris Johnson's own backyard, would he deem it acceptable for 1 minute to say to struggling families and workers, struggle on while we hold a veto on the government that can deliver for you? It's not acceptable there. It's not acceptable here. We've made that very clear to him. We did not manage to convince him of the error of his ways, but be very, very clear that we will persist on these matters.
Do you know about them in any shape or form, the words fixing the protocol rather than scrapping?
The words that we needed to hear, Vicky, is that the British government would honour the established mechanisms and channels that have been agreed to smooth out, to consider and to resolve the hiccups, the difficulties that arise from the application of the protocol. Everybody agrees. There is no difference. There is no division of minds on that matter. Where the line is drawn is when the British government says, with its chest stuck out, that they will act unilaterally, that they will legislate unilaterally, and where the British government, very cynically, I have to say, says to unionism, or a section of political unionism, that they can have a veto on progress. They can have no such veto. Democracy has to rule in the end, and the democratic wishes of the people have to be respected. And be very clear, and I'm flanked by two former ministers of the executive and the First Minister-elect. Everybody's very clear that whatever people's differences or points of divergence, everybody wants government. Everybody wants the executive established. So what we needed to hear from Boris Johnson, and we need to hear yet, is that the executive must be formed. No ifs, no buts, no conditionality, and no unionist veto.
David Young. Another issue that were on the agenda today, Irish language, abortion services and the legacy. What's the plan of society?
Well, we expect to see delivery in terms of abortion services, ONeill, the cultural package, within the next week. That's been given. On the issue of legacy, we have challenged again the British government's approach to all of this. They are absolutely clear that the amnesty they proposed is unacceptable. It's been roundly rejected by all shades of opinion here on the island of Ireland, and indeed condemned internationally. What their alternative proposal is, we don't know. What we do know is that many, many moons ago at Stormont House, agreement was found. A consensus was found amongst the political parties here, and the British government, the Tories, have been really, really very negative and have held.
Well, we seem to have lost the line there to Hillsborough. You were listening to Sinn Fein President Lou McDonald speaking there. Let's rejoin her, actually. Here she is.
School can get up and running again after that meeting with Boris Johnson. And secondly, are you committed to power sharing even if the Prime Minister overrides the protocol? Will you still be committed to that?
Well, firstly, we have not given up on power sharing or the executive, far from it. Power sharing is the only game in town. Working together is the only option. There is no plan B. We live here together. We have to work together. We have to make progress together. And we are up for that. We will work night and day to make that happen. The unfortunate thing is that the British government now is playing a game of brinkmanship with the European institutions, indulging a section of political unionism which believes that it can hold a veto and frustrate and hold society to ransom. That's what needs to change. Our commitment to power sharing, our commitment to working in partnership will never change. And Michelle O'Neill will say, I'm sure for herself, how anxious she is to take office and to lead for everybody. We campaigned on the basis of establishing functioning partnership institutions, electing a First Minister for all. When we said that, we meant that, and we believe that in the current circumstances, so many people, irrespective of how they voted, legitimately expect that they see functioning government now, and we're committed to that.
Sorry, there's out here. Sorry. There are other people waiting.
If the Prime Minister introduces legislation overriding the protocol, is that a red line for you when it comes to power sharing?
There are no red lines for us when it comes to power sharing, bar that power is shared and that others step up and nominate. Now, let me tell you, there is no circumstances we envisage in which the protocol can be wished away, spirited away, or indeed legislated away. The notion that in the mother of all parliaments, as it boasts, that there would be an attempt to legislate to break international law is shocking. It's breathtaking. And we find ourselves astounded that members of the House of Commons or Lords would even countenance such a proposal. What we want is the British government, the European institutions, to sort out the issues about the protocol, to smooth its implementation. We accept that. But what we want is government to be resumed, power sharing to be resumed. And for the first time in the North, for the first time, a huge benchmark of equality, where we have for the first time a nationalist First Minister acting for all and taking office.
Heated was the meeting? What did you say to him directly? I know you worried we're heading towards a trade war.
Well, look, it was a lively meeting. Was it heated? Tough, I think, is the word. I mean, we're not here to beat around the bush or to try and sugarcoat anything. This is a very serious situation. This is a very serious situation. It is unacceptable for families, for children, for communities that are in the most desperate, in some cases, of hard times, that politics, that the British Prime Minister says to those people, those workers and those families, too bad, we have to delay, too bad because others have a veto on their needs, the people's needs being prioritised and addressed. That to our mind is scandalous, actually. I would use the word scandalous.
Shameful.
Yeah, shameful.
I mean, people are struggling right now with the cost of living crisis. We're just 10 days past our election. The people came out in large numbers. They voted for politics to work. They voted for parties to work together. They voted for a local executive that will start to put money in their pockets. They voted to fix our health service, and they're being denied all of that by the DUP, and they're being supported by Boris Johnson and co, who we've just met in this building. That is not acceptable. It's not tolerable, and it shouldn't go on for one day longer. We're determined. We're very determined to be in an executive. We're very determined to turn up for people, as we promised the whole way out the election campaign. It is now time to get into that executive and do business and actually respond to the public's needs. What Boris Johnson is sponsoring in the DUP is nonsense, and it's madness at this time.
Next one.
Thank you. Nick Ross, BBC Newsnight. Mary Lou McDonald, you've said that it was a tough meeting and it was a lively meeting. But can I ask you about Boris Johnson's fundamental point, which is that the Northern Ireland Protocol has lost the confidence of the unionist parties, the unionist community, not just the DUP. And you need to have power sharing here. And at the heart of the Good Friday Agreement is that both communities have confidence in the governance here. And unionists don't have confidence. So he's saying, I'm not wrecking the protocol, but I have to reform it to win the confidence of the unionist communities to get power sharing up and
well, let me answer you as we answered the Prime Minister in the following terms. Firstly, nobody, including unionism, has a veto on progress. The majority of MLAs returned to the Assembly support the protocol. That's a fact. There is no call for a consensus or for a cross-community consensus for the protocol. That's a legal fiction. The British government is peddling this myth to try and dress up what we regard as a very, very negative approach to the Good Friday Agreement and its institutions, and to try and dress it up as being pro-Good Friday Agreement. It's nothing of the sort. The proposed course of action by Boris Johnson and his government can cause nothing other than instability, insecurity and hardship for people. And let me say again, those areas of the protocol where people wish to see smoothed out, altered, there is a mechanism for that to happen. Please don't miss that. There is a forum. The European institutions have engaged, have made progress, will engage, but they need a good faith partner in the British government. So rather than playing these games and giving cover to the DUP for what is essentially a wreckers charter and holding society to ransom, the British government could act constructively and could be clear and could say to one and all, the issues in the protocol will be resolved through the agreed mechanisms, and that Boris Johnson, as Prime Minister, will lead and drive that effort. And in the meantime, for the good of one and all, the executive needs to be formed. By the way, the Ulster Unionist Party's position is that they are willing to enter an executive. Just so as we're clear, it is one party, the DUP, that is holding all others to ransom at a time, as Michelle has said, when people are facing into a cost of living crisis that we haven't seen in 20 or 30 years. And by the way, it's not going to get any easier. It's going to get much more difficult, that cost of living crisis, into the autumn and facing into the winter.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks, folks.
There you go, Sinn Féin's President Mary Lou McDonald and Vice President Michelle O'Neill there addressing the assembled press pack after their meeting with the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. It's been just over a week now since the Northern Ireland election. Sinn Féin, the largest party in the Assembly, ready to form a power-sharing government. But as they said, they feel they are being held to ransom by the DUP and the sticking point, that Northern Ireland Protocol.